So, I would like to start by stealing a line that Maitreyi said in our conversation the other day. There is a difference between justice and judging. And that statement has really stayed with me, and I have been reflecting on it. But to know that difference between justice and judging, perhaps first we need to clarify to ourselves what does justice really mean to us. And of course, perhaps it does hold different meanings for all of us. So to the dialogue that we have over here today is with 5 people who have all had engaging, insightful journeys with justice, the personal, the professional, the political, all of that intertwined. And we will be trying to understand some of their journeys, trying to walk with them a little bit along these paths that they have traversed, and interrogate and inquire about the moments of shift that have happened. I would like to start first with Sujata, about your journey as a survivor within the justice system, and also as a personal almost conversation that you have had with your family and community and really the world at large now.
Thank you so much. It's such a joy to be here. Please forgive my headwear and my eyewear. I recently suffered an injury that has created a condition called photoocular dynia. Who knew such a thing could exist? But basically the bottom line is that if I have too much lights in my eyes, then I will be unable to continue on with the conversation. So, to that end, I will do this thing where looks like I'm trying to be famous or incognito. None of the above is true. I'm very glad to be here. I wish I were more fully with you. So a little bit about, we joke a lot that I should get the words trigger warning tattooed across my forehead because I spend most of my life speaking quite publicly as a survivor. And while I don't share any of the details, because I don't believe that that is beneficial, either for the listener or for me, I come to this work as a survivor first and foremost. And so what does that mean? I came to this work because I felt that the system's on offer when I was a child. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, Appalachia adjacent, the only immigrant family around, only child of color in my school. And I knew very intuitively, not because of anything my father was saying or doing to make me feel unsafe about speaking, but rather more about systems. You know, like I think honestly, if the truth had come out earlier about what we were living with as a family, we could have sought help and helped move on. But I didn't want my father to be incarcerated. I didn't want my mother potentially interrogated and blamed for failing to protect me. I didn't want immigration consequences for my family. These were the things actually ensuring my silence even more than any fear I was living with within my home. And so I think I spent most of my life trying to figure out, how do we help survivors break silence? And if somebody had asked me when I was a child these precious questions that come from Howard Zehr, my dearest and closest mentor, a Mennonite man who's called the grandfather of restorative justice, he asks, instead of asking who was harmed, instead of asking what law was broken, who broke it, and how should they be punished, Howard has encouraged us to ask, who was harmed, what do they need, and whose obligation is it to meet those needs? And so when I first heard those questions, those restorative justice questions, it really lit my heart on fire. If you had asked me what I needed as a child, I wouldn't have said lock up my father. I would have said help my family heal. And so in all these years before I knew about restorative justice, I followed, you know, all the traditional approaches. My father passed away when I was 16, and I threw myself headlong into helping other survivors not live through what I lived through rape crisis, through domestic violence shelters. And the systems were not really efficacious, particularly the legal interventions. I thought I would go to law school, but there was so much pressuring survivors and even criminalizing survivors who refused to testify against their abusers. I thought this was madness. Then I decided to become a defense attorney.
And experience justice and step outside of usual ways of thinking about it.
Caught up in the criminal
Now I hand over the session to our moderator, Ms. Nimisha Srivastava.
The person who harmed them. And even in that, I found the system quite broken.
Thank
I
you.
went on
Thank
to
you
do
so
capital
much,
defense work.
Shongomitra
And,
Simran,
and
for
even
the
there, I
wonderful
saw the system was
introductions
not
and
meeting the needs of anyone, the survivors,
of,
the people causing harm, the community.
this,
And then when I came in contact with
inspiring
Howard and
gathering
his
that
work and
we
his
are all
thinking,
here at today.
it lit my heart on fire. I thought, this is what I
So
needed when I was
I know we
younger.
don't have a lot of time.
This
we
is
are
what I
running a
needed.
little bit late
And this is what
already, and
everyone
I
I've
think we
engaged
have
with might benefit from.
an
And so
incredible,
these are some of the reasons I
set
came
of
to this
people
work.
here with us
Now,
today.
you know, for the past 15 or so years, for 14 years, I spent building diversion programs across the United States. Now in 14 jurisdictions, where we're working even with serious felony crimes, bringing young people together face to face with the person who harmed them, working with prosecutors to help divert those cases, even before children are charged with the crime. We've shown a 44% reduction in recidivism, 91% victim satisfaction rate in hundreds and hundreds of cases across the nation. But really my heart was calling me back to my childhood and asking, how could we apply this in the context of child sexual abuse, interfamily violence, et cetera. And so I helped found an organization called CHAT, which stands for the Collective Healing and Transformation Project. The federal government caught wind of this, and now there was $125 million set aside for addressing interfamilial and sexual violence through the Violence Against Women Act. That's been a little complicated, as one might imagine, as things are in the US these days. But, you know, so slowly, the work is starting to come to people's attention. My own heart really asks me, though, what does it mean to do this work in a way that doesn't overly involve systems that have trouble sort of separating from their own punitiveness? I actually was opposed to this work coming into the Department of Justice because so many of the people that we, like my family, wouldn't have thought to contact the system. And so if we excessively systematize it, this is my fear that we'll actually start to have some attrition with regard to engagement. I know I myself wouldn't have engaged, right? And so this is sort of the questions I'm sitting with now, perpetually asking, you know, how to be who I needed when I was younger, how to create systems that I needed when I was younger, how to create community-based processes, how do we break silence? Really, what would it look like for all of my aunties and uncles to have known about this, for our family to have known about this, and for me to have not felt any shame in being able to speak shamelessly about what occurred in our home? So that really inspires my work and encourages me to help us figure out. I owe everything to my Maori and Aotearoa New Zealand teachers, my Mennonite teachers, my Navajo peacemaking teachers, and so they're really, that's whose feet I touch when I think about what it is that inspires me to do my work. And of course, all the people who've caused harm, who are able to say, yes, I did this, and I would like to make it right, deeply inspire me, as well as all the brave survivors who want to break silence and figure out how to move forward in a good way. So that's what I'll say. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. I think that set a manifesto right there, you know, I suppose, for many of the things that a lot of us here are trying to do. You know, immediately to sort of flip the coin, really, from Sujata's journey as a survivor to Maitreyi's journey of justice with many people who have been accused, who have been facing and continue to face the worst form of punishment that humanity has come up with, the death sentence. And really, in your mitigation work, in your mental health work, you have really gone deep inside their lives, and even, you know, the reasons for why they did what they did, if they did it. What are the, you know, when you hear these survivor-focused narratives, and coming from someone who is a lawyer, who understands justice, what it is meant to do, what are the moments and the aspects that really sort of, you know, stand out for you?
Hi everyone. Good morning. Sorry, I'm a little not slept too well and no coffee, so a little bit down. But I represent prisoners who've been sentenced to death, and I've been doing this work for now 10 years, I think now. And one thing, and I was telling Nimisha and everyone that I've understood is that the death row prisoner population is not a homogeneous population. They have as many narratives of justice and injustice as the number of people that contribute the population. Um, but this question of reimagining justice, and I was trying to sort of synthesize what I've come across from clients I've spoken to, clients my colleagues have spoken to. And I just want to say a few things, and I will also read out excerpts from, this is Nimisha's idea, excerpts from a set of stories that were published a few years ago in an anthology called The Punished, which is based on interviews we had conducted with prisoners who were on death row at that time. But before I begin, there's this quote I really like, and it reminds me of, we'll see how I draw parallels with justice there. But it's a quote by Ursula Le Guin, a famous American author, and it goes like this. She says, love doesn't just sit there like a stone. It has to be made like bread, remade all the time, made new. Um, and I think justice is quite like love. It is not something which is just there for us to reach. And it's not a destination, and I think it's not an event particularly. It may not even be an outcome. And the reason I particularly want to focus on the event is because as lawyers, we are taught courtroom outcomes are ideas of justice. Have I won a case? Have I lost a case? And I can tell you that even when we have prisoners who've been acquitted from death row or prisoners who have who've not been on, whose death sentence has been reduced, it's not very often look like justice to us. When prisoners are acquitted, they have nowhere to go. Recently, we realized that a prisoner who was acquitted a few years ago, within a year of his acquittal, was murdered. People who get commuted often talk about how they'd rather die than continue living where they are and how they are. So it's certainly not an event and it's not an outcome. But I do think that much like love, justice requires a lot of labor. And just as the quote talks about choosing to make bread, we make bread. We choose to do it. I think we need to choose to practice justice every day. I don't know what that looks like, even for myself necessarily, but what I've realized is that something that is essential or as an everyday practice that we have. And it is something we have to do individually and collectively. It is not a one-person exercise, but the practice, the kneading of the bread, the kneading of the dough has to be our individual efforts and our community efforts and efforts to bring the community together. But in one of the questions in the exercise today was asked, what do I think of when I hear justice? And I said ugliness, and I'll tell you why. Because I think the commonalities I see between journeys of survivors and journeys of people I represent is that they also, in a way, in their minds, in their experiences, also survivors. The injustice that they may have suffered is not all that. The acts of injustice might be different, but the experience of injustice may not be all that different. And what it's come to, particularly talking to and listening to my colleagues about prisoners who may have harmed and who are now admitting to the harm. It's thankfully not of relevance to the legal system, so I'm happy about that, because that wouldn't go down well. But one clarity that I think I'm getting more and more is that justice requires ugliness. And what I mean is that justice, part of justice, I think, is us being able to engage with our own ugliness. And I don't mean ugliness as like aesthetically ugly, but anything that we shrink from, whether it's shame, whether it's harm that we have caused, whether it's feelings of inadequacy. I think to be able to create times of justice and spaces of justice, we will need to engage with our own ugly sides in a safe way. And perhaps that will allow us to open up to other people's ugliness and be, if not okay, but then accepting and open to it rather than rejecting it like, like the child all of us have inside us who's lonely and friendless because you've rejected it as ugly. So that to me is sort of things that I think about when I think about justice. Do I have time to quickly read?
You can take 1 minute.
Oh, amazing. I wanted to read 2 excerpts, but I'll quickly read one. So this is an excerpt from a story about 2 men who killed all of the family members of one of the men. And these are 2 men who are very, very close friends. These are now a few excerpts about this one person's journey towards, for the lack of a better word, coming to terms with what has happened. So it goes. Nobody in Manpreet's family had understood his love for Rana, but the police and the lawyers understood even less. At first, Manpreet tried to deny and fight for Rana's sake. Rana is the co-accused who is now dead. Manpreet tried to deny and fight for Rana's sake, but Rana did not live for very long. He got killed while out on parole. The neighbors told us that Rana's death triggered something unexpected in Manpreet, tranquility. He stopped denying his crime, they said. The rigid routine in jail, devoid of any distractions, forced him to think. The drudgery, that kind of discipline, brought him face to face with himself, and he slowly started to come to terms with the source of his madness. He loved Rana still, but he realized he was not angry because his family did not understand their friendship. He was angry because he did not understand it himself. He had been angry with himself. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This book is, it's absolutely full of some of the most powerful things that I have ever read, and really, drives into your soul at some points. Meghna, moving to you, sort of, again, looking at a completely different aspect and the journey of justice that the working women of India have had in their quest for a safe workplace. You work with a number of organizations on their POSH, the prevention of sexual harassment policies, implementation, and sort of training their employees. And we have seen the Me Too movement sort of roll out across India as well. And then a backlash, and then, a backlash to that backlash. How has this journey that has kind of played sort of outside of the justice system and yet asking for a justice which is not, inside of the system, but in our larger ways of living and like everyday being, just a simple will to earn an income. How have you journeyed there? Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Oh, that's loud. Hi, my name is Meghna, and I think of myself as a very accidental entrepreneur. I'm probably the only non-lawyer on this panel, as I am in most spaces that I inhabit, no? Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you bring up the Me Too movement, because that is what started my foray into this space 6.5 years ago. So I think I have had my share of toxic workplaces. I think as an Indian woman, I had made my peace with the home being a place of violence, the public spaces, but school and work was where I thrived. I always thought if I do the right thing, if I work hard enough, this will be a place that will always be safe and predictable for me. So when I became the victim of a lot of unrelenting verbal violence at the workplace from a very trusted senior man, I was more bewildered than anything, right? And it took me a long time to even realize what was happening. Because before the Me Too movement, I don't think any of us had that language. We didn't have the frameworks to understand, narcissistic behavior or abuses of power. Because that's what sexual harassment is, right? It's not about sex. It's about power and the exploitation of that power difference between individuals or groups. By labeling myself a victim, I felt even more powerless. And I started also feeling angry after a while because I was like, with all my privilege, if I was not able to speak out, if I was shunted out of a workplace, but I had only done the best or, the right thing to do, then how must it be for so many people who don't even have that voice and choice, right? And I think when the Me Too movement finally came to Asia, this was hit home in a much bigger way. So some of my friends who were journalists, they were naming and shaming perpetrators online while shielding the survivors, right? And I saw that they could not get jobs after that. I read about this factory in China where the workers were sewing their stories of sexual harassment into the stockings of Hello Kitty factories because they wanted to get the story out about their supervisors, but they were too scared for their lives. So what I understood is the way the global north versus the global majority was experiencing this moment in time was completely different. And I really felt I could no longer just keep listening and watching, and my friends and I say, okay, we have the privilege to exit this workplace. Let's just move on with our lives, right? I started building something on the side as a non-lawyer, as a non-technologist. I started feeling, why can't technology solve this problem? Why can't we have a chatbot that's the intermediary? And this was just a weekend project that took a life of its own, right? Because I think finally the Me Too movement did start asking those questions. If you want, I don't know, VC funding, if you want your FCRA license, are you actually POSH compliant? For the first time, that became more than a checkbox. So that's really, as I say, accidentally how I got into this work. It just swept me up. And now we've worked with, I think, over 200 companies in India, thousands of employees, right? And seen so many stories. At first, I was all gung-ho. I was the angry young woman. I was like, impact over intent. It's right there in the law. And this is the only way it can work. But now I think I am slowly trying to find a middle way in that sense. It's not so black and white. I've spoken to so many non-women survivors of harassment and abuse, and the law has failed them as well, right? I've spoken to so many people who have perpetrated harm and understood better where that harm came from, right? That hurt people sort of thing. I've understood that in the quest to do the right thing, there's been a lot of secondary trauma that has been caused. It's almost like that story of the demon Rakta Bija, right? You cut off his head, each drop of blood becomes a new head. So now you have survivors who might have received justice on paper, but they exit the company and they never get fully employed again because that PTSD follows them everywhere they go, right? You have perpetrators who can't stay on in the company and they ask me, what does it mean? When will everybody accept that I've made amends? Will I always be on the outside looking in for a remark I made, all these decades ago? And there are no right answers. There are more questions than answers at this time, definitely. But I'm very glad that we're having the space to discuss these things, right? What does it mean to find a new normal? What does it mean to restore balance to something that's fundamentally imbalanced? And how can our organizations and companies do better to the people they serve? Because even with the best of intentions, I've heard POSH committees say things like, why were you wearing sleeveless clothes? Why were you standing at the same lunch table with the person who's supposedly harassing you? As if this is proof that you deserve to be harassed or you were never harassed in the first place. I have seen a lot of male allies be like, listen, if you don't report this man, if he harasses anybody else after this, it's on you, right? So all of these things are a very daily lived reality for many, many survivors. There is a spotlight effect. I think most people talk about the stigma, the reputational damage, the risk to your career, but what they don't talk about is also the spotlight that comes on you as a survivor, right? It's almost like, does she think she's good looking enough to be sexually harassed? It's almost like I'm inviting that question if I come forward. So these are all the human-centric pieces that the law has no answers for, right? We're not even able to ask those questions. So I hope that all of us in this room over the next 2 days can probably, try to grapple with some of them. If any of you would like to share those pieces with me as well, I would love to have those conversations because talking about restorative justice or transformative justice in this space is very, very fledgling, right? As Sujata and Maitri were talking about, there's so many other systems which have been grappling with this at least for some time, maybe a little while longer. But workplaces, we still have a long way to go before India's non-tier 1 workplaces can even start talking about safety and inclusion in a real way, right? So that battle it's a different beast. So I think we have a long way to go. So I don't know if that answers your question, Nimisha, but this has been our learning.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Moving to our very own Swagata Raha. I loved what Meghna, you said that, that all of us are, so many of us are seeking answers in the law. And I think you particularly have been on this journey almost of an entire nation of how we as a country are doing justice to our children. Um, from the Juvenile Justice Act being completely, child rights compliant to the changes that came in, bringing children into the adult justice system gambit. And now the highly punitive, uh, you know, uh, makeup of the POCSO Act, child sexual abuse being a protectionist framework. How have we as a country really looked at what justice means for children? And where personally also for you on this journey, having been part of so many campaigns and still really leading, the crusades on how to do this right really, where have the shifts happened for you in, in how we look at justice, in the law and maybe outside of the law as well? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nimisha, for that massive question. Yeah. Okay, let's do this.
I had prepped you.
You did. Okay, I think I'll start by saying that, working with children really challenges your understanding of binary. We're so used to being told that this is right and this is wrong, this is what justice looks like. And the minute you work with children, you can't say, I only work with survivors and I'm not going to work with children who cause harm. And I'm glad that, my journey began with the Center for Child and the Law, which Arlene headed, where I think one of the very few programs in a law university talking about children in conflict with the law. And to be able to see that they're as human as anyone, their crimes don't define them. And when you talk about justice, I think my experience of engaging with laws relating to children has been that they have always been reduced to either objects of protection or targets of punishment. So one is not really looking at them beyond that. Even if we are to talk about survivors, because India is obviously very, very concerned about sexual violence, and there's a patriarchal undertone to it as well. That, we will protect our girls, we will protect the honor of our women, and the best way to do is to decide for them that what they need is the death penalty. So completely belying the fact that those who cause harm to them are known to them, and exactly what, Sujata told us. The many considerations that a survivor has, least of all the justice that is doled out to them in, the criminal justice system. And yet no one's listening because they've decided, the nation has decided for us that this is what women need and children need. We need the death penalty to end sexual violence. When it came to the flashpoint, I think, in our lives, both Arlene and mine particularly, was 2012, the Delhi gang rape case, which I think most of us in this room, we know what that was about. And at that time, I think we found ourselves in the minority. We were the few people who were saying, do not change the law. Do not, forget that this is ultimately, even though he's 17 and a half, even though he was, allegedly part of this brutal offense, do not forget that you stand for something in this country. Do not forget his humanity and the fact that there is a possibility of reform. And then we got challenged too, because people who, were, liberal-minded or interested in human rights told us that you are not thinking of the survivor. Are you completely erasing the pain of the family that went through this, or the pain of all the people on the streets who are really outraged? And I think that's what took us to Sujata. So that journey, it really compelled us to say, hey, that's right. Even the juvenile justice system does not really take into account what it is for the survivor. And what would it look like to have a frame that allows us to engage deeply with the journeys of both, or everyone involved in the process of a harm. And we're very, very grateful that, Sujata was so generous and came down to India and agreed to train us and help us guide through that journey of what it would look like to translate restorative justice processes in India. And I do remember in 2013-14, we were engaging with it theoretically, saying that this is the framework that we need to engage with, and people looking at us with sheer, what's wrong with these people? That, they're living in some la-la land. I remember a journalist telling me that, Swagata, what are you talking about? This is never going to happen in India. And cut to 13 years later, and, there's so much that is happening in India, and we're having these conversations. So I think in terms of learning, the other learnings that have come is to really interrogate what the purpose of the law is and to not assume that because the law exists, it is offering you justice. And I think when we work with many people across the system, they just accept the law as an objective thing, doling out justice without questioning who is the justice for and who is it landing on. So why is it that, as I think Maitreyi said, it's not homogeneous? Are we saying then that sexual violence is only perpetrated by those who come from a low socio-economic strata of our society? Are they the ones who perpetrate violence? Or do we say that the victims in our system are again the ones that come from extremely marginalized communities? In this, I also want to interrogate pick up what Sujata said about co-opting restorative justice. And these are questions that we are grappling with. What happens when there is an intercaste violence that you have to respond to, where the balance of power is extremely skewed? The person who has caused harm carries way more privilege than the person who was harmed. How do you engage with restorative justice in that space? And again, I don't think we have answers, but we are hoping that in the process of working with different organizations, different communities, there will be pathways that emerge. And I think also the fact that it's such a personal journey, that it's not something you do to others. And that's another shift in understanding that I've had. Because initially I looked at it as a process that, okay, let's get trained into this and come on, we will now start mediating conflict. You know, we are so advanced and liberal and we will do justice for everybody. And that has also been unlearning, that, you know, you are not doing justice for anyone. Let them define for themselves what it means to them. I remember the first dialogue that Khushi and I had facilitated, and me being a lawyer, I was like, yes, this is the section that it falls under, and this is the harm that has been caused. And this young person defining the harm for herself and saying that this was a betrayal of our friendship. It's not a violation of, section 375 or 376 of the IPC, but it's the betrayal of our friendship. So powerful. And to say that this is what I want. I do not want an expulsion. I do not want this person to be, thrown out of the community. All I want is for this person to admit that he did it. Such a simple ask, and yet such a powerful one. So again, so much of learning that, we don't get to define what justice means. It's such an individual thing. Of course, there's a sense of fairness, but what the justice in its specificity may look like can be absolutely different for each person.
Thank you so much, Swagata. Let the survivors, let the person who has been harmed define the harm itself before even defining what justice is. And, we sort of go deeper and deeper into these questions, especially when we are sort of talking amongst ourselves. And it is absolutely crucial to have these interrogations within the self and within the reality of justice systems. But at the same time, we are living in a large country, and there are people looking at it from the outside, and there are narratives that are being built all around, and that are building opinions, fortunately or unfortunately, of lawmakers, policy makers, and also, of course, the society at large. Swati, you are a filmmaker who sort of delved way deep into into all of these questions that we sort of, I think we have taken years and years to really grapple with. The question of forgiveness of crimes that have really caused very serious harm, with your amazing film, Rubaru Roshni. And you have journeyed with many, many different people who have watched that film and have come to it with their own experiences of injustice and harm. And we were just talking last night about how, boys in an observation home, a juvenile home, sort of really responded very emotionally to watching that film. And from that incredible narrative to now one of looking at survivors who are really impacted by a harm caused to them, and living in systems, right now living in a society driven by systems on many levels that amplify the harm. What has that journey of building these narratives and delving deep into all of these stories from the outside and yet trying to bring the inside lens been like?
So thank you, Nimisha, and good morning, everyone. I know time is tight, and I didn't want to ramble, so you'll have to forgive me. I've written something down that I want to share, and you'll have to forgive me because I'm going to read it off my screen, because I'm terrified about not being timely.
Thank you so much.
So I'm here today on this wonderful, loving, and august stage by virtue of my work as a filmmaker. And some of you may know my 2019 documentary, Rubaru Roshni. It has traveled far in, very warm restorative justice circles, for which I'm very grateful. It is a film that attempts to hold space for the human heart and to witness the long, difficult, but sometimes possible arc between harm and healing. Now, today I want to speak about the work I've been doing for the last 5 years, because it is my work that is my chronicle. And in the work that I'm now doing the last 5 years, the stories I'm now exploring, they are breaking very differently from the way Rubaru did. So I've been immersed in a doc series that explores a new landscape of harm, and one where violations don't stay contained in a moment, a space, an incident, a dateline, or within the hands of one perpetrator, or even a finite, identifiable group of perpetrators. Rubaru Roshni taught me that even the deepest harm can begin to shift when two people truly choose to face each other and see each other. That human encounter was the beating heart of the film. But with the stories I've been discovering in these last 5 years, the human center is blurred, because the harm is a shapeshifter that has no boundaries. A single act of harm rides on the back of complicit technology to become a million replays, reopening wounds again and again, multiplying damage to the victim relentlessly, and co-opting new, sometimes willing, sometimes unwilling perpetrators in an infinite loop. Let me share one story from the many that I have encountered. A young woman from rural India fought her way into a city nursing college, overcoming poverty, distance, barriers, expectations. While in college, she fell in love with a young man. They shared a normal, trusting relationship. And she eventually broke up with him when he became too controlling. What she did not know was that her boyfriend's hidden camera had recorded their most intimate moments. The first leak came within weeks of the breakup via Facebook profiles. They were fake Facebook profiles. When she discovered this, she tried to file a complaint. The police did not believe her. A few months later, her images had spread on WhatsApp in her village, reaching her parents and even her younger siblings. She got to know about this when her father called her and told her, "Listen, don't ever come back home." WhatsApp had no mechanism to stop the violation, no brakes, no gatekeepers. She valiantly fought urges of self-harm, clinging to the hope that things would get better if she managed to have a career. So she worked hard for the next 2 years, and she completed her nursing degree. Within weeks of her placement at a government hospital, a male patient told her, "Sister, I have seen your sex videos on a porn site. You are famous." Completely unknown to her, over 3,000 pornographic websites housed her content. The original upload of one of the most popular videos had 18 crore views. The comments were chilling. Many sites quoted her name and village address. Anyone even searching for her village or her district for any reason on Google was being served up links to her videos because of algorithms. This is the ecosystem we are dealing with. Porn sites thriving on leaked content. Anyone can upload, no verification, no consent required. Content can be shared, saved, sold, downloaded, re-uploaded in seconds. Uploaders descend like vultures onto fresh content, spicing it up with saleable keywords for virality. So the same video may be uploaded on 1,000 different sites with 1,000 different keywords. Anything that sells, Hindu, Muslim, Muslim, Hindu, so on, use your imagination. Uploaders earn from it, the porn sites earn from it. Search engines don't curb it unless you raise a complaint. Social media platforms are being used as advertisement space for this material. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram. Survivors I have interviewed have found their photos and videos being sold in packages advertised on Instagram and Telegram with their faces and tags of 40 rupees and 50 rupees. They have been forced to buy their own content to gather proof. And the purchasers don't hesitate to use payment mechanisms that reveal their identity. They are so blasé, this is so normalized. This upload, re-upload cycle is just relentless. It took my friend the nurse 8 years with professional help, money that she didn't really have, mental health support, just to remove thousands of links. The legal and technical hurdles are huge. Every site has a different mechanism. Even today, fragments of her content lurk in corners of the internet that she cannot see but constantly fears. Her only hope is that eventually people will get bored of her content. There'll be some new videos coming up. Now, this is one story.
Swati, can I just interrupt for a second? I know that some of these details are, a little graphic. In case someone is disturbed, triggered, please take care of yourself as you, as best for you. You can take a break, walk out of the room, have a drink of water, in case you are triggered. This is a heavy subject matter. I think if we could move on to talk about your own perspective, Swati. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that intervention, Nimisha. I do accept that this is heavy subject matter. I think I just want to quickly finish with my perspective to say that it's not only that this is not one, but there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of such crimes. The victims are overwhelmingly women and girls, but men and other genders are targeted too, even though their numbers are smaller. And so we are now stuck in a loop of sexual harm ad infinitum. One survivor, countless violators, and several profiteers. And Nimisha, what is interesting and important for me to have noted is that in many cases, the original uploader, whether it was a jilted lover, whether it was a show-off husband, or whether it was just a boyfriend's friend having fun, they may not have foreseen this scale of damage.
Right. Absolutely.
The harm that they originally intended, the one who leaked, is multiplied beyond imagination because it's been overtaken by an organized market. There's a wink-wink, nod-nod, big tech ecosystem out there. And there's an infinite world of viewers who are seeking this material, who are consuming, commenting, and they are often unaware of the harm involved. And now AI has also added new spins. Right. And this is now violate whoever you wish kind of technology support being freely available. So what is happening is that this is a reality we all, and especially our young people, are inhabiting. Right. And it's a reality where sexualized violation is being subtly encouraged. And it can be replicated endlessly, long after the intention, long after and beyond the perpetrator. So I'm placing before you some questions that have bothered me. When harm becomes dispersed, automated, corporatized, profit-driven, who restores the survivor and how? Right. On whose door do we lay that burden of justice, which Sujata spoke about so eloquently? Right. What does restoration even look like when harm is infinite? See, I myself am a survivor of sustained sexual abuse in childhood. And while I still deal with many demons, even at this ripe old age of 61, I am still truly grateful for one thing, that smartphone cameras and high-speed internet and social media did not exist in the years of my abuse. Absolutely. So I want to close by saying, talking about the words of a grandmother whom I spoke with. And she described her 12-year-old grandchild's fear of stepping out of home because she was afraid that everyone, everywhere has seen my videos. And these are the things that now keep me awake at night, Nimisha. So I have come to you with the faith that restorative justice has always imagined what the criminal justice system cannot. And my hope is that we, all of us together, we can imagine what justice must look like when sexual harm, propelled by the jet fuel of greed, multiplies faster than a survivor or even an original perpetrator can speak their truth. Thank you for giving me a patient hearing. And if I have hurt anyone in any way, I beg your forgiveness.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Swati. I think that's such an incredible and incredibly important question. When there is harm driven by greed, we do live in a capitalist society. We are not going to be rid of it anytime soon. At whose door do you call for justice? How many social media websites do you request to take, posts down? And how many cyber crime cells do you train, right? And I think, so I will come to Sujata with the really, really big question that Swati has. What answers does restorative justice? I think the imagination that lies behind restorative justice have for us, and alongside that, I think systems that amplify harm, even the systems that we work in terms of the prison system, like I would say even the juvenile correctional system really that we work in. I mean, willingly or unwillingly, they do end up becoming systems that amplify harm, the state and capitalist nexus. Does restorative justice hold answers for that? Do we sort of go forth on that quest and give ourselves grace?
Whew.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have like 3 minutes.
Okay, less than even. Well, I think one of the things that was coming to mind as you were speaking, and I was feeling overwhelmed, I will say, and there's no need to apologize for that. Like, this is a truth. This is a huge truth that is happening with regard to the spread of these images. Child sexual violence images are a huge part of this problem. When I was a young and new lawyer, I had one of my first cases when I was clerking for a federal judge was actually looking at child sexual abuse images that were being spread. The FBI had busted a huge ring, and I had to sort through, as a survivor of this same harm, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos of children being sexually violated. And I'd always sat with this case, still sits in my heart and my mind. When I think about one of the things that restorative justice brings, and it brings back to this notion of ugliness as well, what I love the most about restorative justice is the opportunity for unconditional love. And what I mean by this is the worst things that we have experienced and the worst things that we have done are brought into the light, and the opportunity is there to learn that we are ultimately lovable regardless of what has happened to us or what we have done. Or in some of our cases, in most of our cases, what both we have done and we have suffered, right? Because that line between person who's caused harm and person who experienced harm is not just in the context of children, all of us. I've never met an adult perpetrator of particularly child sexual abuse. I sit in prisons with people who've caused this harm sometimes, and almost uniformly they themselves have been sexually abused as children. I don't bring that as an excuse. But I think that when I think about these harms, my father passed away before I ever got to hear the words, that for his admission, for him to apologize, things that I had yearned for and that I get to vicariously experience when I facilitate dialogues and I get to hear someone apologize. For me, it is about shamelessness. And when I think about ultimately what's going to need to happen in society is that coming together, I helped build a movement in the United States called Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. And there are 80,000 members now. And we sit on stages and we talk about what happened to us, not just sexual violence, all the forms of violence and all the types of harms that we experience. And so for me, it is quite difficult to think, I know there are organizations working. Some woman had gotten a big TED Audacious Prize to help reduce the number of images of child sexual harm that exist on the internet and all these different ways. And as fast as she's working, there's some other new bot or new something that's going to spread these images faster. And so what could happen instead? From a restorative justice heart, I think we could learn to be shameless. And I'm not saying there's not consequences. You know, I was deemed unmarriageable the moment I started taking, you know, a megaphone to the streets with the Take Back the Night rallies we started in the late 80s and early 90s in the US, shamelessly telling people what had been done to me by my father, by a college boyfriend, by someone who a tutor for my LSATs. You know, I've experienced multiple forms of sexual harm. And I speak about it out loud. And, you know, ultimately it didn't ruin my life. It only made my life better. And so I wish, you know, that the systems could, I wish we could fix, you know, the harms of capitalism and the bots and the ways in which the internet is spreading these things so quickly. But what we can do is make it safe for people to say, this happened to me. And for us to create a world in which every nice Indian boy I dated, his mother didn't ultimately break that relationship by saying, that one's broken, put it back, pick a better one. Wow. And so that's really what I think we have to be working towards. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Be shameless. I love that. Yes. Connecting this to something you said, Meghna, that, you know, that really stood out to me, like just making peace with violence at home, in society at large. And, you know, and then you thought that work is the one thing that's going to sort of save me. So, and you know, like it's this sort of constantly looking for a place that is without violence, really, right? How does the, you know, like how does a sort of this approach of working within a system that is not necessarily legal, but you know, it does involve like setting out like a structure, a formal structure. Does it address that sort of inherent, you know, need for a space that is not violent? And you know, like are we sort of moving forward towards this? Are we moving forward towards that level of sort of shamelessness of, you know, women coming up and saying, and men coming up and saying that this happened to me?
I think one of the things right now at this point in time, India has the most intergenerational workforce we've ever had. So 4 generations are coexisting, not too happily. Like you have the boomers, you have Gen X, you have millennials, you have Gen Z. So between the communication and work styles, they might as well be different species, right? Many things that many things that come to us sometimes as posh complaints turn out when we investigate them to be perhaps miscommunications or definitely microaggressions and pieces like that. But sometimes they really are just an error in translation, a difference in value systems from the person who's sitting across from you, right? And there is harm that is caused, but the intention was not there from both sides, for example. Right. So in that sense, although I did talk a lot about the limitations of the POSH law, I am very grateful that this law exists, right, all the way from the Vishaka guidelines that brought it into being. It is one of the few laws in the world that has laid out so clearly what should happen, how your company should handle it, decentralize that decision-making process so we don't have to wait in courts for decades just to get justice, right? So this is one big thing. The second thing the POSH law has done is really build in this aspect of conciliation. So your committee sits with you as a neutral mediator, right? The perpetrator and the survivor sit across from each other and they're trying to have the conversation that Sujata and Swagata are talking about, right? I think when it is done well, which unfortunately is vanishingly rare, it can be very effective and helpful. I think though the things that limit it from being very effective is one, I do see that there are limiting mindsets. There's so many things that all of us have to unlearn, including myself, right? Because as a society, we have normalized things that are not normal, right? So I think that is very difficult to do. It's not easy. None of us are like Buddhas who have already attained a lot of objectivity and enlightenment. That's a big one. The second thing is, again, when the committee members with the best of intentions start jumping in and they're like, no, you should not be okay with that, right? And both parties on the side of the table, the way they will talk about this incident in 3 months, which is the POSH reporting deadline, is very different from how they'll talk about it in 3 years and then in 3 decades, right? It's almost like 2 different people. What they need also from that resolution changes significantly. So I think just having that 3-month deadline or the 6-month deadline, it doesn't take into account the hugely flawed systems and the hugely flawed human beings that we are. Like we said, just 6 years ago, we got the vocabulary to describe what is happening. So how can I know now what exactly I will need for the rest of my life to be okay and move forward and heal? Right? All of these are very big questions that I think very nascently we're trying to answer now. But on a case-by-case basis, I try to take hope from the good resolutions. I hope it stays like that. I hope nobody starts retaliating through the finance team and not paying somebody, subtly. So all these secondary harassments happen, right? Like, yes, I will apologize to you. Let's make it go away. And then 2 months later, suddenly you're not getting any of your expenses reimbursed. You're not getting your salary anymore. It looks like the finance team is glitching, but actually I told them to do that, right? Because I will not forgive you for what you have done to me. So all of these things are the things that really limit us from having people come forward. But this is one thing I really congratulate Gen Z for. I think maybe they saw some of us millennials, they're like, hey, we are not gonna, they come forward, that stigma at least is not there.
Not there.
I see a lot of emotional courage. When there's no psychological safety even, I get very inspired by that, I'm like, okay, so you are aware, you are courageous, that's great. But where the system is set up to respond to your needs in a way that makes sense, there we still have to do the work.
That is what we need to. That's a beautiful segue into a question I want to ask Swagata and Maitreyi, and then we will give the audience a chance to ask a few questions. Both of you work with systems, trying to push them in a certain direction, but at the same time grapple with these questions about co-option. When we ask the system to reimagine justice, are we inevitably going towards co-option? What does the Indian experience point towards? Yes. 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think I've been asking myself that have we also accepted the system as something absolute?
Right, absolutely.
The system, and I think the learning has been that there are many systems that have existed before the system that we consider as being the universal one. So if you're referring to the criminal justice system, is that the universal system that we accept as being the only way to access justice? And I would question that. So therefore, the question about co-option is very real.
Yeah.
Because this is a system that offers justice to those who have privilege, have access to lawyers, or have means to even avoid it.
Yeah.
And if you see the way in which the system has worked for years, and of course I am familiar with this narrative that you have to invest in it, you have to work on it, you fought hard to get systems like this. How can you just give up on it?
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think the question to also ask is, the system works for whom? Like again, going back to that. And then if we say, okay, hey, now let's co-op, let's bring RJ into the system, then who will get the access to RJ? And how is the system going to look at the intersectionalities that already exist, to which it responds in a very limited way? So, when caste interacts with gender, justice looks very different. I mean, the Delhi gang rape case was not the first example of gang rape in India. There have been far worse. We don't know or we don't talk about them. So let's also accept that the system is not neutral. And I would also question, like, in the system.
Yeah, given that I work in the criminal justice system, I would think the fail-safe, or at least one of them, is to take out the word justice from it. Don't talk about justice. Don't give me justice. And I think we perhaps need to think about it in terms of justice adjacent words and concepts, but not justice itself, because justice itself takes a perverse meaning often in the criminal justice system, right? So just to give an example, we had a client, actually Shruti's client, he was sexually abused as a child, right? And so we brought that up as a factor to commute his sentence, and that he shouldn't be sentenced to death. What the judge did, and it's so absurd, it's beautiful. the judge said, oh, he's been sexually abused, he must have committed the offense then.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So it just,
wow.
suddenly you're like, what? That, no.
That's not what we were saying.
But, so I think justice is too, for the lack of a better word, ambiguous a word to be in the criminal process. I think focusing on the smaller, everyday indignities, day-to-day paths or areas is likely to make for a less harsh system, less, I won't even say less biased system, but a less harsh system, and something you can maybe go through without feeling the immense harm that you do, particularly like Swagata also mentioned. There is a massive caste bias and prejudice and a poverty bias and prejudice. And in a growing unequal society, I think we're getting less and less desensitized to people who have to go through all of this. So it's not our concern anymore. And so I'd rather not think of justice within the criminal justice system, but the smaller day-to-day changes, attitudes, systemic changes as well, but not justice. Yeah, does that make sense?
Approach in one. We will take a few questions. We are already at 11:28, so we are kind of out of time, but we'll take maybe 2 questions for the audience, and after that we will close with the final round of comments. Any questions? Someone at the back over there? Yeah.
Can I? Hi. Good morning, everyone. Namaste. Thank you for this conversation. I know it's very difficult, but we're still here to have this conversation. Yeah. Is it better now? Okay. Yeah. Over the weekend, I was reading a book by Bell Hooks, and where she talks about how, as we are talking about justice, there is a crime that has happened because of which justice is needed. And usually when crime happens, it is done by people who have power. So when you have power over someone, then only you can, subject someone to violence or any crime. And she says very beautifully that, when there is power over, there's incapacity, there is loss to give and receive love. So there is so much that a perpetrator is also losing, because so much, there is so much love that human beings can give and receive, and as they perpetrate harm, they're incapable of doing that.
Question.
Yeah, but the question is, sorry.
Yeah.
As all of us, were speaking about survivor, recently I was having a conversation with somebody, and they said that I don't want to be just addressed as a survivor, I'm also a victim. So do you think that when we say survivor, we are somewhere taking away the fact that the person has also been a victim? And, maybe not everybody is still, in their journey of surviving through it. So
Quick introduction also, please.
Yeah, I'm Sanjana, I'm from Enfold.
We'll take the other question, and then we can go to the panel. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I am Prashanti. Good morning, everyone. I am Prashanti Rai from second MSOC, Christ University. So when I was doing my internship in an NGO, I came across a case where a woman was sexually assaulted by a religious leader. And she was, it was a long way to gain justice for her. However, at the end, the justice was served and the perpetrator was captured by the police. But then my question is it hard to get justice when, the crime kind of intersects with religion, especially in countries like India, where religion plays a very important role in people's life?
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I don't think so. So yeah, we can just go ahead with these two. Yes, the survivor, are we denying something to survivors by not referring to them as victims?
I can take just a quick answer. That my primary mode of addressing people is the way they choose to be. Yeah. So for me, what I really love is to avoid labels entirely until someone has chosen their own, but ultimately being really flexible about what they are. If you'd asked me when I was 8, I wouldn't have even had words, right? But then I think other people would have called me a victim, right? And so today I don't define myself at all by what anybody has done to me. For some time I was saying I'm a transcender, but then people thought I was saying I was transgender, and so that got confusing. But generally speaking, I follow the lead of whoever it is that is choosing their own word. And ultimately, I think so much of what we learn in restorative justice comes from indigenous people, and most indigenous languages actually don't even have nouns. They only speak in verb-based things. So instead of calling somebody an offender, the words in Dine and Navajo is acting as if they have no relations. In the verb-based language, we see the possibility of transformation there. Even you wouldn't call something like a bay of water. It's to be a bay, because it will be mist and it will be a river and it will go to the ocean. And so I like to think of our own identities that way, right? Whether it's, I'd never use the word offender or perpetrator. I'd say the person who experienced harm, the person who caused the harm. I find those most useful until somebody chooses their own, and I tend to follow the language of the people that they choose. Yeah, what they choose.
Swagata, please, about the intersection. You were talking about intersections, so religion and justice.
Yeah, I think I also liked the expression that you use, that justice was done the minute he was arrested. So, also just to say that, for us, we associate justice with so many different parts of that process, that, like the act of arrest, particularly of a person who's in power. He's a religious leader. Like for some, that could be justice. But that long road to accountability, especially when religion is involved, is definitely complex. And I think, my colleagues are at the moment dealing with a case which does have, it's a case of incest, but there's also a heavy hand of religion involved. But what I can say is, there's a possibility of hope. And if I may share, if I'm allowed to share, Arlene, on the weekend. Yeah, okay. So on the weekend, on Saturday, Arlene and I are going to be a part of a process where significant members of the church want to sit in a circle to address sexual violence within the church using restorative circles. So what I'm saying is that it's possible, right? Like we are slowly getting there, with that people recognize that we want justice, we want accountability, we want to listen to those who we've harmed and also hold those who've harmed in that same space. So that journey has begun, is what I will say. It's very slow, and when it becomes like an interfaith conflict, what would that look like? We don't know. But the possibility and hope exists.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I'd just like to add to that.
Yeah?
If I may.
Yeah, I think one thing we also see a lot play out in workplace sexual harassment is caste positionality. But unfortunately, it's the elephant in the room and nobody wants to talk about it. They're like, Meghna, this is not what this is. But what people don't understand, everything from surnames to the way you dress to the food you eat, right? All of those can indicate, even some of the jewelry piercings you have, is what I've learned, might indicate your caste positionality. The POSH Act came into being because of the Vishaka guidelines, where Bhanwari Devi was gang raped by 8 upper caste men when she was trying to stop a child marriage in her village. And she's still waiting for justice, by the way, right? So I think we cannot ever see this in isolation. India is a very intersectional land especially, right? But for us to be able to solve for every level of that injustice, there is still a lot of work to do. Because first we need to acknowledge and address our positionality and power that allowed us to commit that atrocity in the first place and expect to get away with it.
Just very briefly on the religious piece, I'm recently facilitating a case around sexual harm caused by a person who holds power within a religious institution and actually utilized his religious position to cause the sexual harm. And what has been absolutely necessary has been his colleagues, his religious colleagues, caring deeply for his own spiritual well-being, to build an accountability team that comes from the same faith background as the person who is causing the harm, and to have them be deeply invested in the spiritual well-being of the person who caused the harm, to get them to see that they're using religion, and that in some ways if you can get there, those who believe in an afterlife, there's like a real meaning of accountability and what's going to come if they don't fix it, you know? And so that was a really miraculous and beautiful part of this case I most recently worked on, was seeing a group of men who share this religion and want to see this person behave in his best way and sort this out before it gets sorted out in the afterlife. So very useful.
Hold on to the mic. So last comments. One concrete thing that is giving you hope for your way forward on your journey of justice, journey towards justice with justice. You can take 5 seconds to think.
I love coming here. It means the world to me that, you know, obviously growing up Indian in America and then being dissociated in many ways from my culture, but then we came a lot as a child. And so for me, the strides that you are making here, it's advancing in very different ways than in the US, you know? And the first National Restorative Justice Conference we had in the US, there were less people than are in the room today. And now, you know, that we have to cut off the registration to 3,000 people. You know, it's like crazy. And so in some ways it grows really fast in the US because we do everything like big. But in other ways, what I'm seeing here gives me a lot of hope. The conversation started in a much deeper and richer way, particularly with regard to the fundamental understanding of interdependence at the basis of everything we do in restorative justice is something we all, South Asians in general, get very quickly. And so for me, my hope is here.
I think for me, what gives me hope is we deal with or we work with people who are generally supposed to be the worst of the worst, and they've committed horrific crimes, and you know, but they're not. To date, it gives me kind of like, it makes me smile, and I'm amused by how exactly human they are, and how yes, they have not very nice parts to them, and it's irritating. But it's really interesting to look at their irritatingness with just irritatingness, right? Like, they're just irritating. It's nothing beyond that. It's nothing, it doesn't speak to, oh, that's why they have committed the offense. They're just irritating. That moment they're irritating. And to me, that gives me hope. That you can look at another person and they're in prison, they're on death row. You might want to be like, oh, poor person, but you're just so irritated at that moment, and it's like, and then you move on and they move on. And I think that kind of connection is what gives me hope. Yeah.
I think I already mentioned that rates of reporting are going up, even in terms of same-sex sexual harassment at workplaces. So that's, I think, an encouraging trend. I also see that now clients have moved from the question, what about false complaints, to what about intersectionality? What about inclusion? What about gender sensitization? Do you do those trainings as well? So I definitely see that as a green flag.
So what gives me hope are the people I meet, and I get to know through the privilege of being able to tell their stories, whether they are those who are on the receiving end of harm or the ones who may have caused harm. They all give me hope.
I think what gives me hope is new possibilities, and many people in this room, there's you know, Shivani here, and working with children of denotified tribes, and to see how restorative processes can travel. You know, be it the church, denotified tribes, the Nirantar team working on gender-based violence, to push ourselves out of the box of, you know, only working with children, but look at the entire range of identities that people carry, and to be able to take restorative practices far and wide.
Okay, Sujata has asked me also to answer the question. I think conversations with you beautiful people, and I think the circle that we had, I was just talking about it in our community building round also. All of us co-organizers, we all got together because there has been a lot of back and forth that we did, to put it mildly, around this organization of the conference. But we all got together and we all expressed ourselves. This is something that did not sit well with me. This is something that I liked. Sangeeta, you want to say something? We are kind of out of time. One line? Okay. Yeah, I'll just finish. So I think these conversations and how grounded and calm it makes me feel, it gives me a lot of hope. Yeah.
So we recently released the value education books for Government of Karnataka, and we have introduced restorative practices in the school workbooks, for the teachers training that we will be doing in the teachers manual. So that gives me a lot of hope.
It's flowing like water. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this dialogue. I definitely am walking out with a lot of hope and inspiration.